Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Storied Arcs podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are doing our one-shot book club style deep dive into The Seeds by Nocenti and David Aja. And if you have not yet read it, stop now, because we're going straight into this one.
Yeah.
We set it up pretty well. In the Zero episode, there's only 4 issues to discuss. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of preamble, but I think we're going to start with the storytelling itself before we get into all of the themes. And I think that's kind of important because this last paragraph from Anne's letter in the back, she says this: "The Seeds is not a commentary on current events. It is a speculation created years ago about an imagined near future. By the time this book comes out, the world will have shifted further. We created a fever dream, a dystopian zone of human disconnection, and yet, in the end, it is a wish that that something leads us out, be it science, nature, the rising tide of human resilience, or bees." So I think all of that to say, it's not a single theme piece of propaganda. It doesn't have a crystal clear message. It's not giving you marching orders. Like, you read this, you accept this doctrine, and you go do this. It's not a moralistic story in that way. And so I think the narrative is just as important as the themes, because the narrative is just as scrambled as the themes.
Yeah, I think it's presenting.
Tangled, I guess
it's presenting a world. It's setting you in a world. And the one thing that I think is interesting and that I really like right off the bat is you're dropped directly into this world, and obviously starts with close up with these bees, and then we get some of this narration about this wall, this division between the zone, capital T, capital Z, where it's technology free. They're Luddites in there. It's basically this Edenistic place, but there's a physical barrier. There's a wall. Though you see the world is dying, you see it's our world, but it's not quite really. It seems more militaristic. The world seems like it's in a lot worse shape, but there's one side of the world, there's the inside, and there's outside. And there's no explanation as to how this happened, why it's happened. Like one phrase that I use a lot, maybe overuse when talking about some of our books, is a lesser comic would have done this.
Yeah.
And I think a lesser comic would have started this opening page of the first issue or the opening part of the trade with a big page of text telling you, here's what happened. This is New York in the year 20 whatever. Society has crumbled, blah, blah, blah. And then this group founded, they founded the zone. They put a wall up, and to come in as like you would have had all this lore, this huge download, and then you would have been dropped in to our character Astra, this journalist, taking pictures of it. You would have been given this download of information saying, here's the world you're in, so the reader feels comfortable. They're not questioning, well, why is this here? Who gets to go through? What's happening? That it alleviates all of that from the gate, because they want to hold your hand as they ease you into the story. And this book does not do that. It throws you right in, and it throws all these images at you that you are left to your own devices to connect and process. They're not walking you through the story. They're just giving it to you and letting you deal with it.
Yeah. And okay, so I have two thoughts on that. One, I think a lot of those lesser books, it's not always the writer's fault. I think,
editor's fault.
Companies that are more obsessed with making money will hamstring an artist and say, no, you can't shake people off on the first page. You gotta let them know where you are. You gotta let them get their bearing so we can sell the second issue. And I don't think Berger Books is interested in that. Yeah. Berger Books is about the writer expressing themselves the way they would like to, and trusting that the final product will be good enough to sell books. So that's a beautiful thing. That's why we love and focus on indie comics. But also, I don't fault anyone who plays the game. You can still tell a good story the other way.
Yeah. Oh, no, you can't. Absolutely. I'm not saying every book that has that sort of opening prologue is a lesser book, but I do think that it is a crutch that some of them lean on, because it's like, well, we don't trust the reader.
Right.
Going
Not
to be
trusting
able
the
to figure
reader,
this out.
and yes, and needing to impose your interpretive framework on it from page one.
Yeah.
I think on the other hand, when you have an opening narrative to like Logan's Run, they're setting it up because the plot absolutely depends on that framework and all the setting. And this one doesn't. It doesn't matter how the wall came to be. Like, those have no bearing on the plot. That's just the setting.
Exactly. I think that's the next logical point is like, well, why is it not there? It's never addressed because it's never important. All that it's in fact, it's barely important that there are even two parts to this world, that there's an inside zone and outside, because that's not ultimately what the story is trying to tell you. When we get into the actual narrative part of the story, the whole bit with Lola and race and everything like that, and the story that Astra is following, that there's no reason why that has to be in the zone. There's no reason why that has to specifically happen over there.
It just does.
Exactly. Yeah. You could easily frame the story just being in the city. So yeah, it's not critical to the storytelling, so they don't waste time with it. So there's not so you're not focusing on it. But when you start reading the book, you don't know that. The reader doesn't know that when you start reading, when you jump right in. So there can be, and I can understand why there could be a level of confusion as to, what am I reading? Why is this important? Why are we focusing on this? Because those opening pages, what's the narration? The narration is all about people on the outside of the wall lamenting or not, the people who have left, quote unquote, who have gone inside the wall. And so that's the framework we're seeing this through, that this wall is going to be important. This division is going to be important. That's what's being presented to us, that this is what the story is going to be about. Ultimately, it's not, but you can see how someone could make that inference.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and I meant to say this in the Zero episode. The other thing that this reminded me of is actually, obviously, a much more grounded version to some extent. The Coldest Winter by Anthony Johnson, illustrated by Steve Perkins,
which became Atomic Blonde.
It doesn't remind me of the movie Atomic Blonde at all.
The Coldest City.
Coldest
I think
City. Oh, is that what it was? Yeah.
I think there are two books. I think the Coldest City is the one that became Atomic Blonde. But yeah, it's the same team. Yeah,
same team. But the heavy shading on the faces, that sometimes pixelated look, and similar kind of espionage-ish vibe, even though this isn't about spies or a spy network, but it is everyone creeping around, everyone keeping secrets.
Yes, definitely.
Everyone, being shifty and making moves and counter moves. So just wanted to do a nice little vibe check there.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think part of that vibe is where I was going next, which is the coloring, or,
oh yeah,
lack thereof, I guess.
I mean, have you ever seen anything like this, like visually?
Yeah. I mean, no, yeah, it's almost monochromatic. It's just like shades of white and black with shading, and then there's kind of this, what would you call that? Like an olive gray, kind of dull olive gray. That's used. It's
yeah, that's tough. Yeah. I mean, I would just, in my primate brain, I was just going to call it green.
But it's very pale. It's very desaturated. It's very muted. But yeah, it's kind of this. It's just this really dull, greenish gray. But yeah, it casts this. It sets the mood as you're reading all the way through, that everything. It's like the sun's never out. It's like a perpetually gloomy, cloudy day. It's like there's no brightness, but you're not in complete darkness. It's not like this isn't like a Sin City situation where it's just everything's in black and white, literal black and white. There are still shades and shadows, but it just feels, you can feel the environment through the page. You can feel how just kind of,
yeah, you want to wear a mask.
Yeah, and you see people
they are wearing masks. Yeah.
Well, and when you see, I guess so, this would be easier. Their pages are numbered. On page 11, as we're following Astra kind of walk back through, we get one of the a panel of like an air horn, and we see it like air quality alert, things like that. So you get the sense that there are bad things going on in the environment. That thing, it's not easy, it's not good to be outside, and you really feel that just through how the colors are expressed. How the way it's shaded, the choice to use essentially just one color, one thing that's not black or white. You get all of that sense. And then when you get to some of these interiors of some of the like the hotel room where Race and Lola are in, we meet them, it just looks like the grimiest, nastiest motel you could possibly be in, and it does that very simply just through where the shadow and where the light hits.
Oh yeah, I mean the walls.
I'm looking at page 12, our first look at Race, and you get a sense of just how disgusting it is in there.
Yeah, when you hear Peter Quill say that his ship would look like a Jackson Pollock under a black light.
Yeah.
That's still an upgrade from this room.
Well, no black light needed here. You can see and feel and smell.
Which actually, it's kind of like having a black light on. That's what the green coloring is.
It almost is.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's graffiti on the walls. You see the floor. You see the bed. Everything about it is just it's so visceral. It's so visceral in the storytelling that you're immediately transported right there. Even if you've never been in a hotel room like this, and Lord knows, I hope you never have, you're aware these places exist, and you feel every bit of that as he's just standing there, as Race is standing there looking out the window. You feel that whole environment. But yeah, so that choice of color, and this isn't like a situation. It's one thing like. I wonder, I don't think I had this thought when I first read it, but this is the kind of book where they could have done the Schindler's List color drop in, yes, everything is very easy. It's all the same every page through. And then, but when they want to highlight something, they drop in like a really bright primary color, they could have done something like that. I don't know what they would have used for that, what that object would have been, but this is the kind of setup where something like that would have been, I think, maybe both effective and also like a little cliche, right? At this point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It would have felt a little rote. Yeah. And nothing they're doing here is rote.
Yes.
By the way, I did phone a friend who's a graphic designer. I pulled it up on my computer, a picture of this. I used an eye droplet sampler to get the hex color code for the green in here, which is AEB 49A. And I said,
oh, of
with
course.
no context, I texted this and I said, what color is this? And within 2 minutes, she said sage. And I was like, we just bought my wife a car, and it's sage green metallic. And yeah, you add a metallic flint to this, and that is the color of her car. Both of us hate it, but we buy used cars, so we get the color we're dealt.
I had no idea that it was called sage, but hey, that's good to know that it's an actual color. So, but yeah, it's pervasive, and it just whatever it is, the fact that it's so consistent, the fact that it's all throughout, right, and that's all you see the whole time. Listen, it gives you, it puts you in the mood. It gives you the vibe of the book, and that vibe is not necessarily a positive one,
Oh no, it's really grim, and it's like, it's more than, I mean, I don't even know if a color can do this, but it's foreboding. But I think that's just like, so here's the thing. I want to say that the art would be that way either way. But here's the thing. The same artist drew crappy rundown apartments in Brooklyn, but was using, purple color a lot, but full range of colors, and it felt perky and upbeat and optimistic.
Yeah,
it felt
jaunty and fun. Yes,
right. Whereas the exact same art depicting also rundown buildings, but choosing this like sage green wash over the whole thing, makes it all feel kind of foreboding
Yeah.
And when it starts to talk about how they're kind of in the final chapter of human history or Earth's history, it's like, yeah, that feels right.
I think, yeah, when they get to that point in the narrative, you're already primed. You've gone through so many pages now.
Right.
You're feeling that you're already there. Yeah, foreboding is great. There is there's a sense of unease. It's meant to put you on edge as you read it. You're not supposed to feel comfortable, and I think that it's so effective because you may not even know it's happening. Because yeah, so when you get to you read it and you feel like, wow, the world is dying. And then they literally tell you, yes, the world is dying. You know, when the aliens actually tell you that Earth is dying, it's on its last legs, and that's how we're here. It makes everything clicks together, and you get the full brunt of what they're trying to do with the combination of story and art there. So yeah, I think it's so cool that it works on that level. Let's see here. What do I have other? Oh, we talked about the 9-panel grid in the Zero episode, and
it smacks you in the first issue.
It really does, and there's so many things I love about it. And I'm gonna quote some page numbers here because I'm assuming everyone's reading the same here. You know, our first actual page of the story, which is the beehive and the bees. That's page 7. Is that what you have right there, Mike? I'm reading digitally right now.
It has to be.
Okay,
yes, that's page 7.
Okay, yeah. So then,
and by the way, we should not gloss over the
the epigram.
Yes. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were the seeds. Mexican proverb.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a great.
I just love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and
every
when
issue
we get the story, we can go with we'll go into those there. But what I like to point out is so the first page, classic 9-panel grid. You see how the panels reflect each other as you go left to right, top to bottom. You know, you see how the story reflects. We kind of get back to where we are. And then on the next page, we got a top row of 3 panels, and then a big splash page that combines the bottom 6 panels. But if you notice what that panel looks like, how that big splash is, you look where that overpass is, where that bridge is. And if you lay it out next to the preceding page or the following page, you know, that bridge comes in essentially where the panel break would be if you were dividing these up into 9 panels in the 3 rows.
Yeah.
So the sky basically is the middle row of panels,
4, 5, and 6. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the bottom where the tank and the soldiers are, and where Astra is walking back towards the camera, that's your bottom row. And you see that all the way through. The next page is 9 panels. The page,
and when you're reading a comic, you are primed to read top left across.
Of course, yeah.
Down.
Well, and especially
so you get the whole width of the sky before you take in the whole picture.
A 9-panel grid. There are plenty of comics that love to mess around with paneling and page layout, and I love those. I love them when they get experimental because they can be challenging. Maybe you have a big splash page that's circular, and you got to figure out what order to read captions or word bubbles, and it can be a pain.
I'm glad someone loves that.
I do. I love it because I love to see them try. I love to see creators take swings and really mess with the median. But the great thing about a 9-panel grid is exactly you're going left to right, top to bottom. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And if those panels are combined, again, you're right. Your eye still moves in that way. So yeah, you're seeing all that blank sky before you get down to the street level, and you're seeing the tanks, and you're like, wait a minute, like there are tanks there? Is it like military occupation? But you're seeing it in that order. And then, again, next page, 9 panels. The page after that, it starts with a third splash page straight on top there. But again, you can compare it right below with the 6 panels that are below it, right? So on the left-hand side, there's a dumpster and a little girl in a mask. In the middle, there's Astra and the word bubbles. And then right on the right-hand side, there's another man, and then there's the rest of the wall. And you can see there are invisible lines there. That's not paneled. It could easily have been paneled. He could have put those dividers in, and you could have seen one whole image. But they put it as a splash page, but you're still primed to see the layout that's there, and you're still reading it, and you're still taking it in that way. And I think that's so cool when they put those invisible lines in. Heck, going back to the page you referenced of Race sitting in that grimy, terrible motel room.
That's another one.
It's very, very subtle, but the crossbar in the window on the far right hand side, it doesn't divide the whole page, but that's basically right where the line where the panel break would be, so even there's division, and you can also see where the walls are and where the shadows fall. That race is placed in the middle. So if you would extend the lines down from the top panel there, where it's the close-up of the hotel sign, the two birds on the wire, and then a view from outside the motel in the window. If you were to extend those panel lines straight down, it would isolate Race right in the middle.
Right.
He doesn't cross over any of the lines. He would be isolated by himself in the middle of the frame, in the middle panel. And again, all that's intentional. And whether or not you notice it as you're reading it or not, it's all internal. And that's some of the stuff I so love in comic storytelling. It's sequential art storytelling, and it's the stuff you can do in a 9-panel grid.
Yes, although my only point of order here, and this is like a masterclass in cinematography, but this is one of those things where it's like, if anyone ever proposed making like a long TV show or movie out of the Seeds, you would have to say, like, why? Like, this wasn't rushed out. It wasn't crudely drawn. It's not half baked and waiting, its final form. The best a director could do would perfectly mimic the framing already done.
Well, I think
it's already done.
I think that would be a failure. I think that would be a failure if this were to be adapted into like a prestige miniseries or something like that. I would want them to throw out the storytelling conceits of the book and say we're not even going to try and do that. That already exists, and take the story as a whole, look at it completely, as a completed story, and tell the story in a way that works for a different medium. Because if they just try to replicate shots because you could see someone being like, oh, well, when we get to here, when we jump storylines and we get to Race and Lola here, we got to have a shot of the hotel sign, then we got to have a shot of the birds, then the exterior shot looking in, and then the big wide shot of him in the room. Like, if they just replicated those shots, it would be terrible. I have no doubt in my mind it would be bad.
Oh, I mean, I think that could be done well, but I think the point is, it's already been expressed that way. It's
unnecessary. Yeah. And that sort of thing, I think, again, only works in this context because of the idea that you have panels. The panels of different size that are then grouped together for larger sizes. You see these things implicitly, and whether you're aware of them, they work on you on a subconscious level. That doesn't work if each one of these is a full frame on your TV or your movie screen. It doesn't translate that way. It only works on the page because you have these subdivided panels, and you're taking in these things. So you're reading it without even knowing it. You see these lines, you see these divisions, and they're not so obvious as like the bridge right there, but you still see things in layers. When the beginning of chapter 3, that's called Bullpen, when Astra walks into the scoop, what's the top third is just the ceiling. It's all black, essentially, and it's just word balloons. And then the next level below that is all the people and the desks. And then you drop down to another set of panels. So again, having these layers, having this differentiation, so these 3 levels, top, middle, bottom, and then 3 columns, left, middle, right. It's just, it organizes the story, and it gives you information. It gives you a feel and a setting that's just, it's baked into the page, and it only works on the page.
Yeah, totally agree. Only point of order, you referred to the birds multiple times.
Did I say the birds?
Yeah. Well, really? No, there are birds.
Oh, yes.
But they're specifically magpies.
Oh, yes.
And that's important.
Yes, it is. It is. My bad.
No, but I don't think they ever use the word magpie in the book. David does multiple times in his letter.
Yes, I think maybe you're supposed to know that. I don't know, but it is interesting. They are lettered very specifically whenever they speak, and one thing that only exists really in the first issue in terms of storytelling related to the lettering here is that both at times Astra has a narration and then Race has narration. And Astra's narration is, as everything else is, it's in all caps. But when we get to Race's narration, it's in mixed case, and it's clearly meant to show, difference in character. Someone else is speaking. What happens then is that they abandon this, and I wonder, something we alluded to in last week in the Zero episode is I wonder if that was a casualty of how long this book took to come out. That in the process of making it, the idea of how they wanted to tell the story was removed, and you no longer have any character's internal dialogue. You don't have that anymore. I wonder if there was a shift in that, because that goes away. You no longer have anyone's internal thoughts, because one would think that as the story goes through, specifically Race's character being the literal alien, what he's thinking, how he's viewing things, what his mindset is, becomes very important to the narrative, and we're not giving it insight anymore. So I wonder if that was a change they made once they decided to take this thing and just tell the whole story together, tell it and complete
That's
it.
interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think I consciously noticed that.
Yeah.
And
I don't think I did when I first read it. It was something that on the reread specifically here, I noticed because I noticed basically because it was a change in lettering. Like, Race speaks.
I did notice the changes in lettering. Yeah.
Well, I noticed that Race speaks in mixed case lettering. So I was then on the lookout as I kept going through the story. Well, now I know when I see that, I know that's him, that's his monologue. And then it never comes back again. It doesn't, it's not used again. It's only there in the opening, in the first part of in the first chapter.
Which
he's
the only character you get inside the head of in that sense, which to me makes it seem in the first issue like Race is the protagonist.
Mm-hmm. And he kind of is.
The synopsis on the back cover makes it seem like Astra is the protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Having read, when I finished the first issue, not Race, but his love interest, I thought she was Lola. Yes, I thought Lola was going to be like, the story's going to follow Lola. We're only concerned with Astra or Race in as far as they relate to Lola, but that isn't the case either. And it's kind of a protagonist-less story. I would definitely say there's not one main protagonist. And I think there is no simple antagonist.
No, I mean, some of the aliens there, the other ones who are less charitable towards the human race, I guess, are ostensibly your antagonists.
I mean, they're on one hand they are doing their magpie business.
I would say they are antagonists in so much as they specifically and directly oppose our other three characters in Astra, Lola, and Race. Right. So they are just very obviously on the other side of whatever divide is there in terms of what their mission is and what Race and Lola want, which is to be together, and then what Astra wants is simply to be a journalist and document the story. So they're just against, and really the other aliens are against Lola and Astra, mainly just because they're humans and they understand it's not their job they're here for a reason. They got to collect their seeds, actively not help the planet, let the planet die. So what they've collected is worth money. Like they're just scavengers basically. So they're only against two of our characters simply because they're human, So I think they count as antagonists, but that would then imply we have three protagonists, I guess, which I don't think is incorrect. No, I don't think so. Yeah.
No, it's not incorrect. Although I would say the same is true of the humans as is true of the bulk of the aliens. The humans, if they were privy to what's going on, would create just as much of a problem for our main three as the aliens would if they were privy to it.
And I think
in that sense, the whole world is against them.
You get a small sense of that through the end after Astra publishes her first story, right? You get a sense of the, kind of this alien hysteria, which kind of always persists with our society and aliens. So I think it really does. I think it maybe shows, it's implying that there's not a whole lot of difference between aliens and the humans here in terms of their reaction to to what our actual protagonists, or our seemingly protagonists, what their situation is. So, but yeah, that's really all I have in terms of kind of the artistic choices, the storytelling choices. Do you want to get into the actual the actual story itself, the narrative, and some of the themes here?
I don't want to do a recap.
Well, no, not a recap,
but beneath our audience. But yeah. Although I think if there were ever a book where a recap would have been helpful, this is probably the one. I don't know if I feel equipped to do a recap, but I think a recap takes just as long as reading it. Basically,
it probably does. Yeah, there's so many facets to it. Yeah.
So anyway,
it's real. The world is dying. There's the outside world. There's the inside world. The zone. The zone is tech free. It's supposed to be like an Edenistic heaven place. There are aliens here who seem to have no relation to either the zone or the outside world. They're here to collect seeds, basically collect the bits and pieces of our world, so they can take them back to some central place and sell them, because they're planning on Earth dying. Yes, because Earth
and they
is
only
dying.
have value if Earth dies. So
yes, it's only worthwhile. And caught in all this is a pair of star-crossed lovers, Lola, who is human, and Race, who is an alien, who have seemingly fallen in love. They want to be together. And then there's Astra, who is the one lone journalist with integrity who wants to tell a real story. And he gets caught up in and thinks she has the story of a lifetime, trying to expose, quote unquote, that A, there are aliens here, and B, that one's in a relationship with the human, and her dilemma of, do I set this out and make a name for myself and potentially put these people at risk, or do I let them be? Do I do what my editor wants and just give them the clickbaity headline? So yeah, that's about 17 different things about this story is about.
Okay,
and it's
yeah.
also,
Which is what I have.
And also there are bees, because bees are very important. That's about it. There it is.
Okay.
Recap done.
So hilariously, I have 9 on my list, and bees didn't make the cut, even though they're on the front cover, the opening page, and the last page.
Yes.
And in the own author's description. But anyway, so I finished this. I got off the couch, and my wife said, what did you think of it? And I was like, honestly, it's kind of a mixed bag, because it tries to do a lot of things in 4 issues, 124 pages. So here are the themes that I picked up on. Technology versus nature for healing the world.
Yes.
Cell phone / technological addiction.
Yes.
The twitchy fingers that they mention. A fatalistic view of the earth. That's almost inherent from the opening pages.
Agreed.
The exploitation of the poor. And I think that one's a little more, but I think, coming here to destroy the thing, or finish destroying the thing, collect what you can from it so you can sell it and profit off of it, has been happening to poor humans throughout all of history. And so they're not exactly colonizers, they're pillagers.
They're scavengers, right?
So,
yeah.
But they are getting rich off of someone else's misfortune, a misfortune they are causing. So it's not quite like a 1-to-1 talking about like the African slave trade or something like that, but it is a similar sense of like, especially given that Earth is not necessarily doomed, we're going to go in there and raid it because we consider that basically of no value enough in its current state. So we're going to take it and extract value from it by selling it. So there's the exploitation of a poor or helpless population. Then there is what I think is probably the weakest link, which is the tropey media journalistic integrity debate.
Yeah.
And it's not helped that right now I'm rewatching Daredevil, and like all of season 1, Karen is on this like journalistic thing, and it's like, I want the truth, and we desperately need Jack Nicholson. Okay, then the next theme, which I think is 7 out of 9, is that there is not a lengthy, but there is an ongoing discussion about the definition of truth, what constitutes truth, very much in a Department of Truth, James Tynion kind of way, where the media determines what is true, both by telling people what they want to hear, reflecting it back to them, and it becomes true by them doing it.
And I think, before I interjected, that was number 8 of 9, right? You have one more.
That was 7.
Okay, well, I think that aspect of the journalism theme, I think that part
That's
is
strong. Yeah.
that is more interesting than the
moral fiber of the journalist pushing against the editor who just wants
clickbait.
That's played out.
Yeah, what is it? Gabrielle, she's the editor in chief of the Scoop. The conversation that she and Astra have about making a clickbaity headline or a real journalism, that is boring when they kind of drill down and start talking about, what is the nature of truth and myth. That's 100%. That part's more interesting. I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So the eighth
I have some
one,
thoughts on that too. Some good thoughts.
Oh
on
yeah,
that.
no, I've got thoughts on all these.
Yeah.
The eighth one, kind of an obscure call out here. It's like a better version of whatever the theme of M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening was, where the Earth fights back against people for abusing it. And this is really in the 4th issue, I think, when it's talking about how, like, all of the catastrophes and everything on Earth is the Earth having a fever trying to sweat out the virus, and the virus is us. Also, shout out to the first Matrix movie, where Agent Smith tells us that we're like a virus. The only organism that does this and moves on.
I can see that. I don't think I would have gone to The Happening as a point of reference.
I just knew the premise, and I knew it was poorly done. So
I didn't know the premise either. Didn't even
just
know that
bringing
much.
up the premise in the Seeds is better than whatever The Happening was.
Probably was, but yeah, I think that's definitely a theme. And that part of that, I think that might tie into one of your earlier themes of like the nature versus technology in terms of healing the world or whatnot. This is almost like nature healing itself. Just
right,
in order to,
right.
in order to do it,
if we would get out of the way, nature is
self-corrective. Yeah. It'll do it catastrophically, but it will heal itself. It will find its equilibrium.
And then finally, there's this theme, which I think is where the bees ultimately tie in, I guess, is this notion of the loneliness of individualism and the longing to be part of a collective. Which is definitely where Lola ends.
Yes, yeah.
And
I think that's meant to be what you're supposed to get out of the zone, right? That was their whole idea. Like the people inside are meant to be like a big.
They were getting human connection again.
It's seen as a commune because there's no technology. No, I think that's what it's meant to be reflected for the.
And how the bees work so efficiently and do everything because they live in a community and they always return to the hive. And so many people in our age have this kind of like disembodied existence without a sense of community. I think it was last month, which was November 2022, there was a New York Times article with a new study that said 1 in 7 U.S. adults does not have a friend.
That's tough.
Like a single friend, yes.
That's really tough.
And so you can see why on that trajectory, what is another 20 years of that going to be like where, people are getting more polarized, they're getting more insulated. People don't go into the office as much for work. People, things like the Kiwanis and Rotary Club, and even, religious institutions where people used to have social gatherings are dying. So there are just not as many organic ways to make human connections. So that longing to be part of something collective, something bigger than yourself, I think is even her word. Whatever that is, that nature, that desire is there for people. We just haven't found a way to fill it. And I think that is partially a critique of technology. So I think there are a lot of criticisms of technology here because 3 of those themes really, the tropey media one also is kind of about technology. Like why do you need clickbaity articles?
Exactly.
Because you need a new article
grabs a headline. Yeah.
Every 4 minutes.
You're scrolling on your phone. You need something that jumps off, that stops someone. So yeah, no, it's definitely, there are definitely some pretty hard critiques on technology and our over reliance on it. It's ubiquity, things like that. Definitely.
Well, and there's even like a little affectation for that in like all of the front and back cover of the book. The inside flaps and the letters in the back are all done on a typewriter font.
Hmm.
which is,
Hmm.
kind of pre-technology technology.
Yeah, it's very,
Um,
very, very Luddite-esque.
Even though I think it is definitely a font. Like
Oh no,
they did it on a computer.
of course it is.
Um,
Of course it is. Of course it is.
I don't doubt that Nocenti owns a typewriter, perhaps a collection of them.
Maybe.
Uh, Nothing quite like Tom Hanks's collection. I don't know how many he has, but I saw a picture one time and I was like, oh my.
He has lots.
I didn't know there were that many options. I
Yes,
thought there were like four
clearly.
typewriters. But apparently they were like iPhones. So anyway, yeah, so those are the themes. I mean, like like, okay, let's go worst to best, maybe.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I think we already said the bad media one is the worst.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the journalistic integrity of like,
Yeah. The I don't care if you make it up, versus the I
I
want to
want
do
to
a
tell
real
the truth.
story.
Yeah, I want to
Yeah, I
be a
want to do a
real
real story.
journalist.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Like
not gonna
we've
stake
seen
down to
that
do what everyone else does.
that that sentiment is like
It's boring.
Aaron Sorkin on his worst day.
Yeah,
Where it's like, it's the hope
yeah.
filled, wide eyed optimist, in the
Now,
newsroom or
what,
whatever.
what I agree. Now, what I will say though is, I think even though that storyline is bad, um, they do not make Astra like insufferable about it. Like that could have
No,
been her.
she's relatively
Yeah,
pragmatic.
yeah, that could have been her defining characteristic of no matter what, I'm telling the real story. In to the point where it could have been like, the story is so real, but Gabrielle, her editor in chief, thinks it's boring, so she's not going to run it. But then Astra goes and self-publishes it and proves to her that this is the real news, and people still want real news and real stories to tell them about what's actually happening in the world. That could have been a very hacky way to go about it.
Yeah, that would have been
Making
a
her
real
so
bummer.
idealistic.
So
Yeah.
if you're gonna have it, at least you don't make a meal out of it.
Yes,
which I think is true
did.
of kind of
Yes.
all of, like, I think the next worst theme is the forbidden romance thing.
Probably
The star-crossed lovers, Romeo and Juliet,
but
Marcus and what? Oh my gosh,
what?
Saga.
Oh yeah,
The saga's supposed
Marco,
to be like,
yeah,
Marco
and
this is on you, Brian Kivon. It's on you.
Lord, oh my God.
If you had not taken that long gap in writing Saga, we would know this
Alana.
right now. Alana, yes,
Alana.
there it is.
Oh my God,
Marco and Alana.
Yeah. Now,
which is supposed to be like the star-crossed lovers after, like, chapter 2. It's like, that was meant to be kind of a sequel of Romeo and Juliet, if that hadn't ended. And I think this is also in a saga-esque type broken down world.
Yeah, and I do agree. I guess it's meant to be presented in a way that you're supposed to identify with them. They're kind of trying to might make their own with the world, but it really ends up being more of a plot device, right? Because they're talking like literally about seeds, collecting seeds, and the idea that they're going to, part of the things they now want to take is whatever this human alien hybrid is. They want to take that out of Lola, and so part of this is race now trying to protect her and protect whatever their offspring is.
To be clear, they're also interested in just taking straight up eggs.
They are too, yeah. which they do from Astra. But there is the idea that this does feel like the most kind of plot contrivancy thing. Like we're gonna put this romance in because it also fuels Astra's journalism plot and her like, if I publish this story and I blow their life up, do I put their lives in danger? Which race ends up saying yes, you actually would. If you publish this, if you publish those pictures, like you mess everything up. So it does feel really more like a plot contrivance, and I don't know if it lands as maybe as well as they think they intend it to, like to make the, hey, here's the one sympathetic quote unquote bad guy because of the aliens, here's the girl who feels out of place because whatever she's suffering from, she has the arm braces, the walker, she has the wheelchair, she feels like she's an outsider, doesn't belong anywhere. So where does she find belonging with a literal alien? I think you're supposed to meant to feel those things there. I don't know if it totally lands because you said there are so many other things there. one thing you just said for the last point was that they didn't make a meal out of that last theme there, of the idealistic journalist part. And I think you could say that about all of these. They don't have enough time to really delve in on any of them. So on the plus side, that means they don't have time and space to dive into anything to make it terrible, but they also don't have time to really dive in and really expand and expound on something that's really, really good and juicy.
Yeah, and I think the cynical mind would say
it's
that is a writer's way of hedging your bet.
Yes.
Like, I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall.
Yeah.
And if you don't like something, I can deflect and say, well, that's not what it's about. That's just one panel.
It's one thing. Yeah. What about other three things over here?
If you do like something, then it's like, oh, well,
you feel cheated.
You can't just give people all what they want.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of the dance that an artist can do.
I think so, yeah. But I think it applies here because I think there are so many different themes there, and none of them get enough room to be really great or really terrible.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I do think when we get to the best theme, I do think that ended up being pretty close to really great.
I'll concede that. I agree. I think I agree with that.
So
anyway, move on. What the next worst one is?
I would say the happening one. The Earth fighting back against humanity, just because it was like it was just thrown in at the end.
That's exactly what I was going to say. If that had been
now, ironically, if you planted that seed in issue 1 and then harvested it in issue 4, no, I mean that's a real playwriting thing because
Chekhov's seed.
Tell you, right? Yeah, if you introduce a gun in the first act, you have to fire it in the third act. And if you fire a gun in the third act, you have to introduce it in the first act.
Yes.
And that's, if you want to really stick the landing and drive home that message of like the Earth is fighting back against this virus, which is humanity, you have to plant that seed somehow. And I guess as I'm talking about it out loud, I guess I'm starting to see how the things were planted together because these humans, the reason like their muscles have all atrophied, they're wearing respirators. They're, none of them can just, very few of them can just walk around and talk and be healthy. Mm-hmm. For two reasons. One, people on this side of the wall are so addicted to screens and technology. They don't know how to do basic motor functions anymore without their device, which is a self-destructive human tendency. And the reason their air is so bad and their water is so bad and their lifestyle is so bad is that technology has polluted the planet. And that is, so I guess you could call that's the seed for what's, being, the crop in the final pages there, where it's saying, but it's not the same. The Earth fighting back is different than
I think
self-destructive.
That is showing the cause. This is what's happening to the world. But I think though, if they had put that, and if they had laced that idea through all the issues, the idea of the Earth is fighting back against the virus that is humanity, if they had put that throughout an underlying current throughout all the issues, when you get to issue 4, the end of the book, and that's revealed, I think that's what the book becomes about. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like if they had put
that's
that
true.
Underlying all the way through, if they went out of their way to put some hints in of this is what's happening with the world, and this is, you're seeing these events happen, and then it's explained at the end of this is what it is, that you then look back on the previous issues and say, oh, that's what the book is about. The book is about the Earth protecting itself against us. And that becomes the theme. The flip side is what actually happens here is you introduce it at the end and it feels like it kind of comes out of left field a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think
there's almost like there's almost like there's no way to balance it. It can't just be an idea that gets lobbed out there because it feels wildly unfulfilled. But the only way to do that is to make it a full idea, and then it becomes the only idea. So
right, yeah. And I think that's a perfectly valid point.
Yeah. It leads to why so much is kind of scattershot, because there is no seemingly one overarching idea. throughout the book.
Exactly. Yeah. Although I think they should all be rowing in the same basic direction, and I do think they are.
I agree. But okay, we'll stay with the rowing analogy. Oh, well, no, this is good. You have 9 points, right?
Yeah.
Good. 8-man crew plus a coxswain. That's 9 people in a boat. They're all rowing in the same direction, but they're not all listening to the coxswain as when they're telling them to row, and they're rowing at different times and maybe at slightly different speeds. Yeah. So they're generally going in the right way, but they're not in sync, no one's rowing backwards.
Right. It's not all optimized performance.
They're not all putting the paddle in the water at the same time. Perfect. Nailed that one. Awesome.
I cannot believe you had more information on rowing.
You know what? Are
you an Olympics fan?
There. What? Well, I love the Olympics. So yeah, when the Olympics are on, if we're talking rowing, we're talking kayak, whatever it is, I watch everything on the Olympics. So yeah, that's where all that comes from. But
I have never seen an Olympic event.
Oh, geez.
Isn't that amazing? And I'm a sports fan.
I love the Olympics.
I just don't know why. It's like, I think it's like if your family was into it when you grew up, like my family just never mentioned it. We never had it on the TV. Yeah. And like my first like serious girlfriend, her family was like, got out all of these like, snacks and everything to watch like the opening parade or something, or they were lighting something.
Yes.
They were like all
Parade
crying.
of Nations. And
they were all crying. And I was like, are they going to play sports? I thought this was that. I was like, I don't know a lot about this, but I thought they would play sports.
Oh, good Lord. The Olympics are off.
And they were like, no, not tonight. And so and I was like, okay, I'm out. I'll see you guys when the sports start.
All right.
But anyway.
All right. So that was that was the first 3, or is that first 4 we've gone through so far?
Oh boy. Okay. So we did the journalistic thing, the forbidden romance thing,
the earth healing itself.
The earth healing itself thing. Right. Okay.
So number 4.
So number 4, and I'm going to say this just because I think it was probably pretty played out by the time 2018, certainly by the time 2020, the whole thing dropped, which is the whole, like, people are addicted to their devices and technology. It's like, I don't even think that's fair to call it a theme.
And almost
like
that,
the fact that they brought it up more than once.
Yeah.
I was annoyed.
And I think specifically the idea of equating that with being like a disease, like that being like a sickness,
right.
I agree with that. That's very played out. I think we just accepted the fact that we have phones and devices we're connected. That's just what it is. I agree. That's just
right.
And
that being said, I'm sure the DSM-5 or DSM-6 will have like an actual disease, like a disorder, a cell phone addiction.
Probably. I mean, definitely. Yeah.
Like I started like a new therapist, for like a month in the fall. And I went to like the betterhelp.com, and you like do the drop down of like, here are the issues I'm dealing with, and addicted to my phone is one of them.
Well, yeah.
People seek professional counseling and therapy for that.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, no, that's real, but no one is like surprised or shocked that theme came up. And there's never like another side to it. So there's no complexity to that.
Yeah. I think, and maybe that is when this was being written, said, I think in the letter, Nocenti said she started writing it in like early 2016, and then AHA started drawing it in like early 2017. So yeah, we're in that time when it was still the idea of, hey, are we on our phones too much? Was still kind of a conversation piece.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
Right. The first article that I saved about like technology addiction and stuff like that it was in 2012.
Okay. Yeah.
And it just became, and then there was like the famous Louis C.K. bit in like 2011, 2012 about like the Wi-Fi on the plane breaking.
Yeah. Everything's amazing. Nobody's happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, anyway. I think that's very played out. It's also, again, I think it's only meant to be here. Again, it's not even really like a plot point, because again, the idea of this division, this wall, the thing we start the story with of here's where the regular world is that's all addicted to their phones and their tablets or screens. And then the zone where everyone's a Luddite and there's no technology, like that's not actually critical to the story at all. So the fact that this is brought up, it's there. It's like, this is, I think it's another representation of this idea of sickness and illness. What's a virus? What's causing the decline of the earth and humanity and all
Yeah.
that.
So
And,
I guess
and
if
so
you
we're
take
showing
it
this difference.
as a symptom of the
Hmm.
systemic problem,
Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
To me, it felt
But
like
it's not really a
boomer
theme of
cheap
anything.
shots at
Yeah.
young people.
Yeah. It's not really a theme that's explored, I think. And
Right.
it's just left
And
out there.
again, there's no opposing viewpoint on that
Yes. Yeah.
to create tension around it. It's just
Yeah.
like here's
Because,
declarative statements about
yeah.
this thing being bad.
Yeah.
And we're going
Because
to do it again and again and again.
Because when we go into the zone, which is supposed to be this technology-free place, like it isn't like, oh, look how wonderful everything is. There isn't
Right.
like saying
It didn't get
look,
better.
yeah, it's a different kind of the same. Yeah. If they were really trying to get at the idea that our addiction to our devices is so terrible, then the place that the zone would have truly been this like hedonistic paradise, as opposed to just the people thinking it is. When Astra goes in there and we're exposed to it, it isn't like, oh my God, Styx is so much better because there's no technology and no phones. Because they even make a big deal about it when Lola goes in, like they smash her phone on the ground and the guy's like, I don't make the rules, they do. I just got this is what I got to do. You can't have any
really
technology.
Unnecessary. I'm like, is there no basket you can put it in?
Exactly. And because there's no real follow-up, I do think it's a very shallow, very cursory reading and presentation of that idea. Yeah. And that actually could be lower. That actually could maybe be like the second weakest storyline, but it's still in the bottom half, I guess.
Yeah. However, I think we're past all the weak themes. Now we get to good themes, but now I'm ranking them based on the execution of a good theme.
Okay. Okay. I follow.
Okay. So the next weakest one would be the good side of the journalism thing, that definition of truth, who defines the truth, what constitutes truth. Great theme. As I recall, only one scene, one discussion.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yes. I was going to ask if the reason it wasn't higher was because it was only the one back and forth in the first issue. The first issue? Yeah, first issue, right?
Yeah. Now, they kind of inkle at it again when she's making that that determination about whether to post the article or not, because she's like, I have what both my editor and me want. Yes. I get the big truth. She gets the big clickbait.
Yeah.
And can I give us both what we want and, sacrifice these other people?
Yeah.
Or is the greater integrity act like that's good, but that's not that's a good payoff for the bad plot line.
The bad plot line.
Where's the payoff for who decides what is true?
Yeah.
Crafting the narrative.
And I wonder if there's a little bit of that at the end, the final story, when they go to like the alien con and she does the whole thing of where she captures the one guy like in the bathroom who's just wearing a rubber mask, and she catches the picture of it, over his head.
Right.
And then the story becomes, no, there are no aliens. It's all a hoax. It's so it's almost like she told a real story about fake aliens, but made the story all aliens are fake. I almost feel like that's kind of what it is. That whole exchange, it reminded me of, have you ever seen The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance?
Oh boy, when I was a kid, it's a Western, right?
Old school Western.
Yeah,
John Ford.
My dad was huge into Westerns. I had to watch them all.
So I'm going to spoil this movie for you. This is a very, very old movie.
I don't care about it. Yes.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the listeners. But it's a great movie. Jimmy Stewart, John Wayne together. And the story is, real quick, it's the idea that this Jimmy Stewart character comes to the small town out in the West. And he's later in his life, he's like a senator. He's really accomplished because he is credited with having killed the notorious outlaw Liberty Valance. So his whole life and career is based on this assumption that he was the one who stopped this outlaw and like cleaned up crime and all that, and that shot him to this great heights. And towards the end of his life, and when he goes back to the town, he reveals that it was actually John Wayne character, his friend, who had just recently died, which is why he was back in town. That no, I didn't do this. John Wayne's character did this, but he gave me the credit because it allowed me to advance, to become something better and help more people. And when he's being interviewed by a reporter, and this is happening, when Jimmy Stewart's character tells the reporter this, the reporter takes his notes and he tears them up. and Jimmy Stewart's like, "What? You're not gonna? I just told you the story. I told you the truth. You're not gonna print it." And the reporter looks back to him and says an incredibly famous line. He says, "Sir, this is the West. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend." Because he understood that the idea of Jimmy Stewart's character of being this guy who shot this outlaw and everything that was built off of that, him becoming this politician, this champion for the people, that had more good, helped more people than proper attribution for who actually shot this outlaw, this bad guy.
Yeah, so which is then lifted for The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
People deserve something better than the truth. They preserve Harvey Dent's image.
Yeah. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. And I think that's what Gabrielle and Astra start kind of banding about in terms of what is true, what is not true. Does it really matter if you put it out there and people start believing it? Then have you manifested the truth?
Right. I think you
mentioned the Department of Truth, the James Tynion series with Martin Simons. That's the whole premise of that book. The idea that you can manipulate the world based on what you feed to people and what people believe. So that's kind of what, I would have loved to have seen more of that in their interaction, between Astra, the journalist, and Gabriella, the
right. Because that was a good issue that had natural tension. It just didn't get enough screen time.
Yeah. But
so
I think
this was a 6-issue series.
Yeah,
I'm sure it would have come back.
Yeah, but like I said, I think the end, ultimately, the story that Astra files about aliens being fake to cover for the fact that there are actually aliens here, to throw them off that scent. I think that's meant to reflect back on that conversation about the idea of it doesn't matter if aliens are real or not. If we show them a story that shows they're fake, everyone will believe they're fake. They'll forget about the previous story, because her first story about aliens,
and it will shatter the credibility of future accounts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Claiming they saw an alien.
Even her first story about the alien being in a relationship, like she mentioned, like that blows up, and that causes the hysteria of like the alien convention and people dressing up and all that stuff. So she wrote the story, an actual story, a real story that led to this larger hysteria. And then she used that hysteria to then cut that whole thing off and help the actual alien. So I think that's meant to reflect that, but it's never addressed as to this is why she's doing that. So I think that's why it's unclear if that's actually meant to be a connection for those story points.
I mean, we said it in the Zero. This is not a hand-holdy book.
Yeah.
And
I
mean, the
read
fact
it that
that
way,
you and I both got there
Mhm.
means it's there.
I'm down with that.
And I think it means it was opaque. It was hard to reach.
Yeah.
And it was on the top shelf, but it was there.
But I'm 6
and it was
5,
placed
so
there,
I got it.
I think, but yeah.
Yeah. But that is a story that's a theme that I would have, in terms of the journalism aspect, if the entire journalism storyline theme of this comic had just been that idea throughout the whole story, I think I would have liked it a lot more. If that had been the main,
I know
the main
it would have been really cool.
So, yeah.
Regardless of setting and everything else.
Exactly. Yeah.
That could have all been the same even.
It really could have been. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I've got 3 things left, I think, which would be belonging to be part of a collective. So we did the happening, we did the definition of truth, we did the media. Oh yeah. So we've got the exploitation of the poor, longing to be part of a collective, technology versus nature healing the world, and a fatalistic view of Earth. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm gonna knock out exploitation of the poor next, because I think much like the definition of truth thing, it was like that was an interesting thing, but it was just that was ornamental to the story.
I was gonna say that's a very, very background thing of
however, I do think it's kind
of
where the title comes from. These seed collectors are taking the seeds, and just like magpies, the birds, they hoard shiny things, and ironically, they hoard them to attract mates, which we see Race does very early on.
Yeah.
I think that's good. You have the magpie analogy. I was thinking more along the lines of like human exploitation and, one um, one powerful culture misusing a non-powerful culture or disadvantaged culture.
Mm-hmm.
That's finally happening to all of humanity in the way that humanity did it to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of us getting our comeuppance in a sense while still being pitiable. I
Yeah,
think it's an
yeah,
interesting theme, but I
I
don't think
agree.
there's that much there to talk
Yeah,
about.
that I think is the most indirect theme in terms of like I don't think that one's ever even explicitly addressed,
But
but
I
it's
mean, I would
there.
love
It's
it because
there.
I
Yeah.
I always had a I don't know, when I was like 19 or something, I was like scheming of writing sci-fi, and I always thought, what if, you know, there was some alien race that came and found our planet almost entirely covered in water, and water is like the most precious commodity everywhere else, and we can barely get ourselves like to the moon, like we can barely get ourselves in space.
Yeah.
uh so like we have no stick to threaten them with. We just have the thing they want,
Yeah.
and can try to set the price unless they don't like the price. And
In
basically
which case, there's nothing we could do.
the way the West treats the Near East and Middle East with
Yeah.
oil, that is how the rest of the galaxy would be treating us with our water.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, you can feel like you're at the table as long as you have what we want and we're getting it at a price we're okay with.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to come in and install a new government, and like the aliens would come in, knock out our leader, set up a new election for us until we elect someone they like. So anyway, I was like,
sorry,
I've always thought
I,
that was a fun
yeah.
theme.
I think it's funny that you mentioned being at the table. That we mentioned the
Oh yes,
epigrams.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. At the beginning of issue 2, there are 2 epigrams, but the first one is,
Not
a
at the
modern
table.
proverb. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yep.
Which I think is perfectly apt for what you're talking about in terms of this disparity of abusing and taking advantage of the disadvantaged class. The idea that you're not at the table, you're the one being used, you're the one being eaten, you're the
Right.
one being devoured. But yeah, I think it's more indirect, but it's definitely there. And it would be an interesting story. It'd be a different story if they focused on just a couple of these and said, this is what the story's about. We're going to focus on 2 or 3 of these, and this is the story. It would read a lot different. But I think it would be, well, I was going to say it'd be more interesting, but I can't actually say that for certain.
No, I don't think I can say that, but I do think, what if this were 9 little 12-page books, that come in a box set, and they're just 9 different stories
in the world,
the same universe. Yeah,
that'd be interesting. Yeah, and kind of drop the overall narrative, and you make our star-crossed lovers just one subset, and you understand because the world they're living in, the setup of the universe. You can read their one story and see what their life is like, and then you can follow a journalist, and then that could work. Actually, that'd be interesting. That'd be.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that's like
it would probably flow better. It would flow better,
right?
Weirdly, it would flow better by being less connected.
Yes, without trying to draw connections, and just letting the things speak and breathe. Which I think is what they try to do by breaking each issue into chapters.
I agree. I think you're probably right with that. By each one having each of those chapters just jump somewhere else.
Break when the chapter hit.
Yeah. But it just jumps somewhere else. No explanation. Again, like we mentioned last week, there's no overall narration that serves as a segue, because so many times when you're reading a book that has these kind of breaks, there'll be some sort of narration that ends on one page with like a ... and you turn the page, and then that thought finishes and it wraps up the previous story, but also leads you right into the next story that's somewhere else, the next part of the chapter. There's nothing here that makes any connective tissue. It's just, here's a story, you're done, boom, turn the page, next story, you're somewhere else. And it's meant to be disjointed in that way, but you are still supposed to be able to follow it. They're expecting you to follow it.
Yeah. Well, and we did. Only did I feel like I was following it once it ended. And I was like, okay, I don't feel like the conclusion didn't confuse me, so I didn't feel like it left things on the table that I was missing.
I'm with you there. But the path to getting there is pretty murky water.
Oh yeah. Okay.
All right.
So that was exploitation of the poor.
So
I've got left. Yes, I've got left longing to be part of a collective, technology healing the world versus nature healing the world. And actually, I think those are the only two left. We did the cell phone technology addiction. Oh, the fatalistic view of the earth.
Yeah. Fail
Yeah, yeah. Okay. That I think that's the next one because again, well, I think it didn't get enough airtime. I think it's implicit because it's a kind of a dystopian setting. Although
Exactly.
I do think it did create good tension when they're having the debate about technology healing the world versus nature healing the world. It's ultimately comes down to a debate about like, oh, is the earth done or are we just about to hit a new stride?
Yeah.
Are these robotic
Yeah.
bees going to lift us out of this mess? Clean up our world, get us back on the right track. Um, and even the aliens have some internal discussions like, I don't know if these guys are actually like dead yet. Like that's usually when we
Yeah.
come in. But
Yeah.
there's still a lot of them here and they're intelligent life. And
Yeah.
normally we're going to
They're not
kind of
single celled.
right.
Yeah. They're
Um,
yeah.
and so I thought that actually brought some complexity to the fatalistic view because I think it's very easy to just state, especially in dystopian, to just state like, oh, the world is screwed.
The world is
Um,
not. Yeah.
it's like, okay, everybody thinks that,
Yeah.
that's
There is
that's
a
not a
there is a
point of view.
balancing act they have to have there because there is just the nature of, oh, we're in a dystopian nearest future, which says the world is dying. Okay, well, how many hundreds of stories, thousands of sci-fi stories are set in that way? But yeah, they did manage to bring a little bit extra to that to, again, I think salvage it from potentially being just a boring rote tropey storyline. You know, oh, the world is
Oh,
dying,
100%.
and
Yeah,
it's at the end. But
they
there
did a
is
really nice
a
job
little
with
bit of
that.
twist there. Yeah, I think they gave you just enough on this one to where it saves it from being a boring trope, but still, it's also not given the room to let those extra tidbits like really be fully formed. They don't quite get those enough there to save it from being tropey, but not enough to really make it a super interesting theme to explore and to talk about.
Yeah. Um, that being said, I'm glad they brought the tension to it that they did, and that really you feel more optimism for our world from the aliens pillaging it than you do from the humans on it, because the people living on it, just remember how things used to be, and they're like, oh, this is so far downhill from where it was.
Yeah,
Whereas the people who are professional, planet raiders
yeah,
come in and they're like, this is not the mess we were promised.
yeah. This looks a little more put together than we thought.
Yeah. So anyway, and I thought it was very similar to how Mark Russell in Flintstones has this, bleak outlook on the world and on religion and on science, but then you get these, bowling ball and vacuum cleaner
Yeah,
relationships where they're making you really feel things and think like, oh well, this relationship's worth saving.
yes, yeah.
Um,
This is worthwhile. Doesn't matter that it's not human.
right. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's all there is to say about that. Then our last two, the longing to be part of a collective and technology versus nature healing the world. I think those are a toss up. I think those are the two biggest themes.
Those get the most. Those get the most airtime. Yeah.
Um, I think the longing to be part of a collective. The only way I can tie in the obscure pig slaughter story, um, is that this Luddite has this beautiful connection with his animals. They all have names.
Mm-hmm.
He really loves and respects and reveres them, but also he needs to eat.
Yes.
Um, and and I know that Anne is very big on animal rights. So I think giving that human face to that kind of story shows, first of all, how humanity is meant to be connected, not just to each other, but to, Earth and the nature and other animals. And, I have a friend who She was a vegetarian for a while. She's no longer a vegetarian, but she does not eat meat flippantly. So, she says, like, every time I have a meal and meat is on the table, I try to remember, I try to picture that animal and remember that some animal gave its life for me to have this meal. And we did, the TikTok trend calls it white people taco night, where we just took our Ortega shells and, whatever. And I took a pound of ground beef without picturing a cow once. I took a pound of ground beef, put it in a skillet with taco seasoning and, onion, tomato, all that stuff. Then I got cheese out, also coming from a cow. Again, I don't live within 50 miles, I don't know how many miles of a cow. Like I don't interact with cows. I've never looked a cow in the eyes, but I've eaten a lot of them. So I think having that connection, or not having that connection is something that we've lost. And I think that's kind of the fragmentation of the modern world, that technology has caused, urban living has caused. There's all kinds of causes. But whereas people were all very connected to the people around them, like 24/7 access to a much smaller group of people as opposed to 24/7 access on a superficial level to many, many people, which is what technology offers. And you were much more likely to be connected with your food and to know the animals that you were eating and things like that. So I don't know. I thought that was an interesting vantage point for the Luddite. As I was reading it, I was like, is this part of the same story? Or is this just like a weird diatribe making me want to be vegetarian?
Yeah, I think I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, but I think also with specific regard to this storyline and the next storyline about the idea, the collective and the need for that, those are really the only two that are kind of present throughout, because the bees are there throughout. The farmer, I guess that comes in the beginning of issue 2, right? Is that when that shows up? Right when, yeah, that's when we cross over into we start getting that when we cross over into the zone. So those are some of the ones I think get the most airtime to talk about. So they get the most play. So they're presented. They're
I
given
don't
the
even
most
know if we
time to
got names
breathe.
for those characters.
I don't think we do. I don't think we do.
He may address his wife by name, Susan, maybe.
Maybe I'm trying to find it right now, but yeah, I think it's that there's I don't think they're trying to put off a hidden message there, but in terms of like vegetarianism versus not, but
No,
I
no,
do
no.
think
Yeah, but I do think it is about being
mindful.
connected with the world.
I think you use the word mindful. Yeah, I think that's what it is. That it is just have an understanding and a greater appreciation, or have any appreciation for what it takes and what the cost is to feed people. So yeah, the idea that, again, this nature versus technology, understanding where this stuff comes from, that have some respect for it, and the earth.
Which is a juxtaposition, by the way, and I realize this now this is page 51, and it is Jack is the guy's name.
Okay.
He reads the Bible to this pig.
Yeah.
Has a last meal with it. I mean, really sweet stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, that is contrasted with the alien saying, "Come here, girl."
Yeah.
And getting ready to stick a fork in it, as we see Estra on the ground, and they're getting ready to take what they want from her.
Yes.
And so you see this noble Luddite taking only what he needs and with great pain. And then you see this alien, just being totally flippant about life.
Yeah, the technologically advanced being, just coming in, taking what it wants, with no regard for anything else.
Yeah. So let me ask you, and I guess, the connectedness here, the community mentality, all of that stuff. If the bees were totally absent from this story, would that have made any difference to you at all?
No,
Like her waking up covered in bees, Like
It, it,
I
it,
really liked the discussion about the mechanical versus the organic bees.
Mhm.
But like, as the opening and closing framing device,
Well,
and then, them.
would it would not have made a difference. I don't think it would have made a difference in the actual narrative part, the actual storytelling, but the larger metaphor of the story.
Sure.
Because the idea that, like bees are like wildly important. If we don't have bees, no bees means like no pollination of plants, and the plants die, the people die, the world
Yeah, no, I
dies.
saw
So
B movie.
yeah, yeah. So they're bees are incredibly important. So yeah, in terms of the narrative aspect, I don't think it's that critical. That is the only thing that I think is meant to be like, this is just the overall metaphor thing, and then they explain it with the back and forth about the mechanical bees versus the actual bees, and then when they go into, they go into the power box, or whatever, and they find that the actual bees have just overrun the mechanical bees and integrated them into their hive, and then at the end, I think is it Lola who opens up like some giant room, and it's one massive hive of bees, and so that it's like they're finding a way, and they're going to persist, and they're going to be there to do that. They're going to last, and which means if they're going to last, I mean maybe the planet's going to last. So I get a sense that again, none of those things are like narratively important to what happens to Lola, Race, and Astra, and the aliens, and Gabrielle,
Right.
and the scoop, and all that. None of it's actually important to that. That's just meant to be the overall, I think, the overall theme, which ties into the yearning to be part of a collective, to be part of a group, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that theme, again, it doesn't tell you. It's not like a simpleton. I feel like a college freshman, would think they're being really profound by saying like, we all need to be part of a collective. We've
Yeah,
all become
yeah,
so fragmented and so
yeah.
individualistic and whatever else. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's kind of, banal at best, to put it that way. But to show people who are living differently than that, and to show people who have lived two steps further than where we are with that, is a great way to make that point without being so on the nose.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So anyway, our final theme, which I mean, again, these are more tangled than I realized, because we've ended up talking about most of them while talking about other ones, which
Mhm.
means there is necessary connective tissue.
Yeah,
And if it was released into 9 individual little books like I suggested, our podcast would be trying to connect all the tissues. Like, that's just what humans do. Humans, like, our brains are made to integrate things.
that's
So
there's a lot of hard truth in that.
and the fact that they've integrated it and we're like trying to parse it now, it's just like, man, that is what at least the Western mind does. It's like, anytime something is structured, we parse it and systematize it. And anytime something is like that, we try to harmonize it and lump it all together. So anyway,
Mhm.
that's just how we analyze things. It's not right
Yeah,
or wrong.
it is.
Is what it is. But technology versus nature healing the world, I thought this was a really interesting discussion. They place a high stakes bet on it.
Mhm.
And I thought it was an interesting discussion because I think it showed great empathy towards the developers and users of technology. Because ostensibly every other point in this book is anti-technology. Technology is bad. It's bad for
Technology
you.
is
It's bad for us. Bad
it's
for the
be-
world.
it's being invented and used from a not a diabolical sense, but it's all negative. That
Right.
It's creation and use, everything about it. There's no positives there. It's all done with ill intent.
Right. Yet,
Yeah.
One of our only optimistic beats in the entire book comes from the guy with all of these great inventions that he's working on, including his bees, which are
Yeah.
a failure.
Yes.
But he's using technology for the right things and for the right reasons.
Yes. Yes.
Which means the book is not an all-out condemnation of technology. It's something
No.
more nuanced than that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
which elevates all of the other discussion about technology.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. It's this is the one area where a contrasting view is given, really given time, as opposed to some of the other ones we talk about. They kind of an idea is thrown out there, but we're not seeing another side of that. You know, this is one where we're actually seeing a little more of it's not all bad. It's not all terrible. That it can be used for good, even if it doesn't actually solve the problem here. Like I said, his bees fail, so he loses that bet. But the effort is there, the intent is there that you can actually use technology to do the right thing. Doesn't mean you'll be successful at it, but you can give it a shot. You can give it a go.
Right. And I guess the only point left on the table, or the only viewpoint not expressed, is that you can be a Luddite and bad for the world. Yes. Which would be the inverse. If it was a 4x4 or a 2x2 grid, and it's like, you can be pro technology and good for the world. You can be pro technology, bad for the world. You can be Luddite and good for the world, but can you be Luddite and bad for the world? That's the only thing not depicted, as far as I know. But I think if all three other categories exist, surely there are Luddites who are bad for the world.
Yeah, I think so. Well, and maybe those are people that are not maybe necessarily bad for the world, but the implication is if you can be a Luddite and be a bad person, ergo you'd be bad for the world. That kind of thing, maybe.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be quite so on the nose.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Well, those are all of my themes. Are there any themes, beats, poignant dialogue that I'm missing here? Otherwise, I do want to get like your summative thoughts on the book and maybe even like a rating of some kind.
Yeah, I don't have any other. I mean, you've covered it. It's pretty scattershot, but I think you covered all the main points that came across my brain as I reread this here. This is there are a lot of things thrown out against the wall, and not all of it sticks, but there are some interesting ideas, some that are more interesting than others, but it's trying to do a lot of things, and by not attempting to actually complete all those things, I think it's overall successful in deploying those ideas. But there are a lot of what ifs, like, well, again, what if instead of doing all these ideas, they just focused on a couple of them? What would the story have been there? Would have been more enjoyable? Would you have gotten the same experience? Would you still have been in the world in the same way? Would you have been immersed in the same way? And that I don't know. But I think overall it's a mostly successful book in terms of the story it's telling and its delivery method. I think it is incredibly successful in its method of storytelling. I think it's a little less successful in the actual story it's telling.
Yeah. And that, by the way, is the consensus on the Goodreads. Like,
okay. All right.
800 reviews there.
Yeah. I think the artistic choices they make for how they tell the story are really fantastic and really, really cool. But the actual story they're telling in those methods are less successful overall, I think. Yeah. That's where I land, I think.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like eating a pretty good meal on a silver platter. And I would give it 3.5 out of 5 Bs, which I'm going to come up with a unique rating system for each book we cover now.
I feel that's about right. 3.5 out of 5. I think 3 to 3.5 is somewhere in that zone.
Which I prefer the 10B scale, so you don't have to do the halves. In which case, I'd call it 7. 7 out of 10. Which
I think that
might be a tad generous, but
yeah, I think
I like the ambition of it.
Yeah. Oh no, exactly. It gets points for what it's trying to do, but I think it loses points in the actual execution. And again, that doesn't mean it's bad. That doesn't mean it's a bad read.
But so I think I think it was part of it is that I started much lower, and as we've been talking, it's gained an extra B from me, because one of the comments that I had written down was that this feels like, and I used to be a TA, which is why I use this analogy a lot. This feels like when you read a freshman English paper, from a college freshman, and they try to just carpet bomb as many points in there as they can to try to make sure they get credit for everything mentioned in class.
Yeah. Like they're trying to hit a rubric, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
It feels like trying to hit a rubric. And that was how all of these discordant topics felt to me as I was reading it. As we're discussing it, I'm realizing like, oh, these actually, that those two cross paths there, and those two cross paths there, and those two cross paths there. She doesn't have a message. She's not trying to drive something home.
Yeah.
I think she's trying to start a conversation. And I think given that aim is where I give it its 7th B. I certainly would never go any lower than 6 out of 10.
I think so.
7 out of 10 is the nice way.
Yeah. And I guess what I would say about it is that, and this is not meant to be any slander towards Nocenti, but when I go back to this book to reread down the line, and it's something I definitely will, it will be because I'm so engrossed by the art. I'm so engrossed by the storytelling that AHA is doing with the paneling and the colors and all of that. And again, I don't mean to dismiss the writing, but I will not return to this book because I'm so engrossed in the story or I'm really into themes. This is the book I'll go back to because I'll just be like, oh, this AHA art is so good.
Yeah.
Like, this page is so good.
I think that's fair. There's certainly other Nocenti you would return to. So it's not an anti.
Oh, yeah.
I think not an anti-Anne statement. It's just a very pro-David statement.
That's, I think for this book specifically, the story is less important to me going back through it. And the things they are or are not trying to explore are less important to me. Just, I think the craft visually is for me is just, it's overwhelming in this book. Because I think it's so cool and so incredible what he's doing with his art and his storytelling on his kind of part of the story of the comic. So like I said, that's not a shot. It's not meant to be a shot at Nocenti or this book in general, because I think there are some really cool ideas, and I think there are some pages and some panels where I will go back to, and because I do love the sentiments being expressed there. The some of the back and forth, some of the conversations are really great, and I would return to those. So I'm not saying I would ignore all the words when I go back through it, but the main draw for me would be just really diving into the art and really taking a look and analyzing how those panels are put together. How he's using the panel structure, how he's using light and shadow and this one color, which we now know is sage. Just how he does all that and puts it together is just really, truly incredible to me.
Yeah. And I think I actually had a similar experience. There was a section where I was struggling to get through it. And I tried to remember the lesson that I learned earlier in 2022 from reading Step by Bloody Step, which is that the art can carry you through a story in comics. So I reread a couple pages without reading the dialogue again, just to kind of get my bearing and see like what the story. That being said, my criticism of any of the story or narrative is just, I guess, in the breadth and lack of depth in some areas. But I think all of the dialogue and like all of the actual words that are there are great. Like, I think it's very readable prose and dialogue. All of those things are good.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's just the story.
Yeah, I think that's very fair, and I think that's
because you don't have characters. They have a cliche conversation about journalism, but they're not speaking cliches.
I think that now that you say that, I think that's maybe what I was trying to express in terms of it isn't that it's written poorly. It's just that I already know that some of these ideas aren't going to be fully explored. So when I read them through, I know I'm not going to get some of these. I'm not going to get a further exploration that maybe I would want just on my own level. So I would skip those just because I know, well, this is a great conversation, but I know it's not going to go anywhere. Or I know where this is going, and I know this conversation is actually kind of silly and dumb because I don't like the topic they're talking about. You're right. So it's less about the actual writing. The writing is fine. It's really good. But because I know the themes, I know where they're going or where they're not going. That's, I think, what I mean by I'm not going back for that's not the draw for me. That right. isn't what's bringing me back.
Yeah. And I think that's you don't have to say anything negative about anyone.
Yeah. Now that you said that out loud,
what the draw is this.
Yeah. When you said that out loud, that clicked in me that, okay, that's actually what I was trying to say about the writing, about wanting to or not wanting to go and read certain things again as to what grabs me and what doesn't there. So yeah, that's great. That's great.
Well, and as you may recall, the episode that, as we record this, that is not out yet, was our holiday wish list episode. And in that, one of the books I mentioned wanting to do in 2023 was The Seeds. I didn't realize it would be the very first book we did. And the reason I said, I was like, it's not even that I'm particularly in love with that book. It's that I want an excuse to talk about David Aja.
That's true.
And that was my whole rationale, because having not been into the comics in the 80s and not being an X-Men reader, I'd actually had very little to no exposure to Nocenti. Mm-hmm. That being said, I am a pretty good collection of Daredevil stuff, and I realized, I have read Nocenti. Mm-hmm. I don't think like the biggest Nocenti fans would jump straight to the Daredevil work, but Daredevil fans typically find it absolutely iconic. Either that or they really hate it for reasons
that don't apply to Daredevil.
Reasons have very little to do with the book or the character.
Yeah,
it has more to do with the nature of modern audiences.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, no, I said I agree. Again, Aja's his list of credits aren't that long, and if we did cross over and did like a big 2 book, I mean, the Hawkeye run with Matt Fraction is one of the greatest. And again, Immortal Iron Fist is very good, despite being a story about Danny Rand. So, but this is, I think,
I'm
great
open
way
to
go
doing
into it.
A one-shot, one-time episode just on the Fraction Aja issue with the dog.
Oh, issue 11. Pizza's my business.
Yeah.
We could go a long way on that. We can go a long way on Lucky there. But yeah, no, it is great.
Again,
to see.
That's one with very few words, and that's not us throwing shade at Matt Fraction. We love Matt Fraction.
Yeah.
That's just saying David Aja just absolutely steals the show.
But again, that's one of those things though, that a writer still writes a script. He's still writing the action.
Right. He's
the artist is still
charting the course.
Yeah, the artist is still plotting against something. It's just that he gets to leave less room for word balloons and text boxes. Although they're all word balloons, they're obscured, but his art can shine a lot more because he knows there's not going to be dialogue over on him. He doesn't have to account for where word balloons and text boxes go. So, but yeah, no, like Aja is great. And so I'm really glad we did this book to really spotlight it. So, I do have one last final thing. If unless you have any more, one kind of last Easter egg that I really, really liked is, in the first issue when Astra goes to Club Death, which is again this kind of weird subplot of like, again, they don't. It's kind of dropped into this idea that you go to this club and they have some designer drug where you hallucinate and you see your death, and that's like the big thing, and that's like the metaphor for the planet is dying, and so what better place to go than the hottest club in the world called Club Death? But when she's there, because she's supposed to do a story on this, she is wearing the shirt from Hawkeye that Kate Bishop wears, which is the Russian. It's the Russian shirt. It says Arrow in Russian, and it has the arrowhead on it.
That's nice.
Yeah, and that's a really fun Easter egg that he brought over. That Astrid is wearing the same shirt that Kate wears in that series. So I was a big fan of that when I first read it, and then seeing it again on the reread was like, oh right, I did the Leo pointing meme, except I did it at my tablet
Yeah.
which was in my hands already. So that's a really fun little bit that for
Yeah,
if you've read Hawkeye,
never would have caught that.
Yeah, it's a big fan of that when artists get to reference themselves. I always get a kick out of it.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great. I mean, just the fact that like I think very successful Disney Plus show Hawkeye,
I think,
was ripping heavily on David Aja's art.
Oh yeah, I mean,
like,
and
more so than Matt Fraction's storytelling, it was David's color scheme, David's aesthetic.
And this, we don't need to get into the idea of credit compensation, but yes, because the setup for Hawkeye was so different. The base, like where Clint Barton was as a character,
he wasn't going to be a Brooklyn landlord.
Yeah, was so different. They had to adjust the story, but yeah, I mean the logo, the way the end credits were styled, everything about it. I mean the shirt that Kate wears, the shirt, the Russian Arrow shirt, like Haley Steinfeld wears that in the show too. Like, it's there. So they pulled so much more so than just about any other Marvel MCU property, be it a TV show or a movie. Hawkeye, I think, was the one that is pulled the most directly from an overall artist aesthetic.
Right. And that's David Aja.
It's all
which is why we're talking about it.
His design, his look, his
someone
work.
has forgotten what we were talking about. It is all comes back to David.
It is his work is so great. And listen, I would love for him to do more than just covers, but again, I don't know how long it takes. I get the sense it takes him a little while to draw. I mean, even on that Hawkeye run, they eventually split the story where Kate leaves New York and goes west, and then they alternate issues where David Aja draws the Clint story in New York, and then Annie Wu draws the Kate story in LA. So, maybe that needs a little more time to get through some of these issues. But then really, when you look at what he does in the Seeds here, especially some of the background stuff, even though they're the smaller, quote unquote, smaller 9-panel grids there, these smaller little panels, some of those larger, 3 and 6 level, 3 and 6 panel combinations there, kind of those mini splashes. There's so much detail, especially kind of like you mentioned, kind of the pointillism, like the dots, like the dot matrix coloring there. Again, can't be easy to do all of that. I'm sure it's time consuming. So I would love for him to do more interior stuff. I think his storytelling is so great. But in the meantime, we'll just hold on to what we have and take whatever we can get from him. Because I wish he would do more than covers sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure we will cover more David Aja on this podcast at some point, even if it means dipping into the big two.
Yeah.
I would love to read more and Nocenti as well. Again, that's another one that's tough because it's so much on the big two.
Yeah.
But she had that series in 2020, so like crime neo-noir, Ruby Falls. Yeah, that was another book on Berger Books. Yeah. There's plenty of options out. I mean, someone who's been around as long as Nocenti has plenty to talk about.
Yeah.
However, in trying to not cover the same artist over and over again, because we could easily just go through the total bibliography of some of these people that we love.
Yeah,
we're going to keep it moving forward for now. And I think that's all I have to share about the Seeds, but I really enjoyed reading it not in a negative way, but I enjoyed finishing it. There's a sense of pride of saying, like, it's a tough book and I made it through and I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, no, I think
the challenge.
I do think as difficult as this book may be to get through, even for an experienced reader, I think this has a specific sense of satisfaction of getting to the end and seeing how some of these threads tie together, whether or not you feel they tie together in a satisfying way in your own mind. You have to acknowledge that they do wrap things up, that they do come to a conclusion. There is an end, there is a satisfying end. Again, what your mileage can vary as to how satisfying you find that. But when you get to the end, you can then look back on some of those harder points in the earlier parts of the book, and say, okay, this is why they were doing that. This is how this connects, and you start seeing those threads come together. I think there is a satisfied feeling that comes with that, especially with this book.
Yeah.
Yep.
Couldn't agree more. And we will see you next week for what we don't even know yet. We probably have better knowledge than us at this point.
Yeah, at this point, when this comes out, we'll probably already have an idea of what it is. But as recording right now, it's still a mystery to us.
Yeah, still up in the air. So anyway, Thank you for joining us as always, and we will see you for our next Zero episode leading into the next release.
Peace.